What is going on, everybody? We are back again today for another No Limits Rapid Fire. We do rapid fire features, rapid fire fun, rapid fire content, rapid fire coaching. We multi-purpose this along with our AMA on Fridays on Instagram and really look for ways to elevate and empower anybody that we possibly can, but also bring individuals who have a unique perspective on the world to you. I think perspective points us at everything that's important. It all happens through connection. It all happens through conversation. It all happens by tapping into the collective wisdom of what the lessons are we can extract from other people's lives. And then how do we become intentional in applying those into our own? And so rapid fire is designed to do just that. Give you the ability in a very short period of time to get to know someone, shift your perspective, elevate and empower you, and also help you better connect to who you are, who you're doing this for, who you're doing this with, and ultimately who you're going to impact. As you know, everything we do through the Brian Bogert companies and all of our entities is on a mission to impact 1 billion lives as quickly as possible. And so anytime I see someone that I believe can be a part of that collective impact, that I think is truly amplifying their messages and connections through the world in a meaningful way, I want to bring them to you, because it's not going to be Brian Bogert. It's not going to be No Limits that gets to 1 billion alone. It's going to be happening through the collective impact of all of our efforts together. And so each and every one of you who tunes in each week, who asks questions, who gives us guest suggestions, and who allows us to come in and actually have some of those fun coaching and content moments, I just want to say thank you for a second. You know, I'm really excited for our guest today. He and I met a couple of months ago, and there was just an immediate connection. It was one of those things that I could feel the authenticity. I could feel his heart through a virtual screen, but I could also recognize that this guy operated at a different vibration and frequency. For someone like myself, who's been on over 400 podcasts in the last 2 years, which I say not to impress, but to impress upon the point, perspective is everything. Not all podcast hosts are created equal, right? And all of a sudden, I connect with a guy who's taking a completely different tone, a different depth in the way that he navigated our conversation. He didn't come in with the typical questions that I would get asked, or the traditional 7 questions on the things that we might cover or teach people. He brought it with a completely different perspective. You know, Jeff Beto is a person that I think is going to be a long-time friend of mine. We became fast friends, but I will tell you that his background and the way he views the world, I didn't see him coming. And frankly, I don't typically do research on people before I meet with them, because I don't want to be jaded. I don't want to have a perspective shift. I want to just absorb who they are. And so Jeff came in and literally kind of knocked my socks off, because it was very obvious that he was in a position where he had done a lot of work himself. He's gone through those internal journeys. He's overcome massive struggle. He's also had massive amounts of success, at least on the way that we define it externally in the world. But he's also had a lot of success internally in ways that we may never measure externally. You know, he's got a really interesting blend of a background in the technology and the gaming industry, but someone who has a master's in spiritual psychology. And when he came to me, the depth was very obvious, because not only did I feel his heart, but the mind, body, and mind-heart connection that this man possesses is truly one of the ways that he moves through the world. He activates. And so he's the COO and co-founder of Enjoy Global, who's doing some really revolutionary things in the challenge space. We've seen a lot of those areas. And so with no further ado, I'm going to bring him up, and I'm going to let you hear directly from him, and we're going to take this conversation a little bit further. What's going on, brother?
Hey, Brian. Thanks for having me. So good to see you, brother.
Dude, you too, man. Like I said in the little intro there, man, I just felt immediate connection with you.
Yeah, me too.
Right. And I think that that's truly the way that you operate through the world. And so before I go further into some questions, I gave a little bit of insight into who you are, but it never comes better than from the source. So can you let everybody know who you are, what you're up to, and who you're planning to impact?
Absolutely. So first of all, thanks for being here. And that was a wonderful intro. You did an amazing job. I really appreciate the thought that you put into that. And who I am is really someone like a lot of you who are trying to do and make a difference in the world by being the best version of myself that I can. And that version evolves over time. I tell everybody that, kind of the start of my journey was in 8th grade. I come from a small town in middle America, 8,000 people. And going into 8th grade, I was really budding. I had what they clinically diagnosed as an attitude problem, a bad attitude. and I was really butting heads with my parents, especially my dad. And to his credit, instead of writing it off to those terrible preteen years or whatever the case was, he gave me Earl Nightingale's Strangest Secret in the World cassette tape. That's a while ago. And he challenged me to listen to it. And I reluctantly did. And then I listened to it again. And then I really listened to it. And it was the first time I'd ever heard anyone talk about the power of our mind, the power of our thoughts, that we could set goals and create our future it put me on a trajectory that was eternally grateful for. I started listening to and reading everything I could get my hands on. I became the most positive kid in my hometown by a lot. That's not saying a lot. There weren't that many kids in my hometown, but it really did change the trajectory of my life. And I always hoped from that point on that I would be able to be in some way in the industry, in an arena where I would be able to support and help people in a way that cassette did for me.
Dude, I love that. I have to really just honor something that you just said, because you said it just so passively, but there's a lot of depth and connection in the words that you chose around even your process on absorbing the information in the book that you were given or the tape that you were given, the cassette tape, right? You said, I listened to it and then I listened to it again and then I really listened to it. And it's really interesting because one of my old business partners used to say, because I used to read a book a week, and I don't say this to impress again either. I just say it to impress on the point. I'm a big believer that we learn from those around us and the things that we consume. And so for me, I like to consume information to learn and grow. But he always said to me, he's like, Brian, you're always reading these books. He's like, they're all the same topics. He's like, they all say the same thing. They all do this. They all do that. They're all giving perspective. They're all giving lessons. They're all giving strategy. He's like, why do you read so many of them? And I said, not only do I read so many of them, but I actually re-listen to the ones that I know I took the most from in the first listen, because every single time I hear something different. And depending on the depth at which we experience the cassette tapes, whatever we listen to, whatever we're reading, right? Or the lens that we're viewing the world through actively in this moment, we could read the same book 2 days in a row and take something completely different from it.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, and so I actually give a lot of credit to you for the fact that you even said that. And you also just kind of said it passively, like, oh yeah, I listened to it 3 different times. Well, there was a letter I wrote my dad a couple of months ago, and it took him 7 times to read it before he absorbed all that was in it. Right. And so what gave you that instinct at that age? Because there's wisdom through the ability to get repetition and absorbing that, especially at the age that you did.
Well, I wasn't happy. I'm frustrated. There's something going on. I don't know exactly what it is. My body's changing. I'm nervous at school. I'm not sure, there's a lot going on in the world at any age, but at that age, like I knew that something was wrong. And so listening to someone who offered insight and, there is the truth that resonates no matter what, like kids hear it. I have a 7-year-old, 80-year-olds here. Like truth is truth. And that's a beautiful thing. You said you read a book a week and someone says they're basically all the same. Yeah, but they're a unique way of presenting the same truth. And it's going to go in at a different level on us, and hopefully reach us at a cellular level. But that's why as you mentioned, I have my master's in spiritual psychology. And one of the kind of like spiritual, magical things that we would always reference is you could pick up a magazine or a book and turn to a page and whatever you read would be exactly what you needed to hear. Well, we've all had that experience. That's not really magic. The truth is, if we're asking a question, then the answer is going to be wherever we look, because that's what we're looking for, and it shows up. And so I think when we hear something we like, or we hear something that moves us, we listen again, we're a little bit different. Now we hear a little bit different. Even though the words are the same, the depth that we're listening to or the place that we're listening from is different. And therefore the message hits a little bit different as well.
So I 1,000% agree with every word that just came out of your mouth. I couldn't have said it better myself. I just love how that's why so many people who even speak on the same topics talk about the same topics, but they do it in their own cadence, their own language, their own energy, their own vibration and frequency, their own delivery, which also means that other people are going to receive the same message from me that they might not from you, or vice versa. And so you also said something really profound, again, not a surprise, because you always layer levels of depth. And one of the reasons I love talking to you, but you talked about if we're asking the right questions, right, then we're going to be in a position where like, that's what we can actually move ourselves towards. Yeah. But I think what you also really hit on is the fact that we can ask the right question and not actually be open to receive the answer or whatever we're asking for. Mm-hmm. And so can you talk about your lessons through spiritual psychology and in your own life where you've been able to actually ask those questions, maybe have been blocked in periods, but how you've shifted yourself to be open to receive the messages, the money, or the words and the impact at the times that you're ready for them based on the questions you're asking?
Yeah, that's a great question. And thank you. If you give me just a little bit of space, I'm going to take you back again. So
take me back, bro. I love it.
Okay. So growing up again after this, going into high school, college, coming out of college, everything worked for me. I had all this, positive stuff going in. I trusted the universe. Like things just seemed to unfold magically. Where I went to school, how I got a chance to play basketball in college, like how things opened up after school, like just it was miraculous in a lot of ways. And I felt like, okay, this is just how life works. Then I worked in the gaming industry. I was an entrepreneur and a partner in a video game publishing company. Again, that worked. We were one of those stories that started in an attic, then a small office, then a bigger office. And we became the number one publishing company for the Mac back when Steve Jobs was still at Apple and all those things. And so it was this but I wasn't happy. Like, again, I'd hit this point where every 6 months I'd wake up and I'm like, this is not why I came. I don't love video games. Like the people are creative. It's super awesome. I'm making a lot of money. I have a great title. The lifestyle is awesome, but I'm still not fulfilled. And something would gnaw at us. And I think at me, and I think that like we can all relate to that, like again, at some point. So then I was like searching. I ran into someone very fortuitously. They introduced me to this master's in spiritual psychology, and I go, now I feel like I'm on this track. Okay, I've been introduced to coaching. This is what I want to do. I get out of there and I wrote a book as my second year project, and I'm all ready to go. Like everything's always worked for me. And I start my coaching business and I struggle. I struggle to get clients. I struggle. Like, I'm like this, no one buys my book. Like, I'm like, what's going on? Like, I'm totally in this right space. And I struggled for a lot longer than I care to admit. Thankfully I had money from, this, and I was doing yoga and a bunch of other things. And I had this lifestyle that, again, I thought was successful, but I couldn't get my purpose dialed in. And then like, I still wasn't listening. I still was defining my success by money and all these other things, not by providing service. And then 2008 hit, and I was really invested in real estate, and I lost everything. And this, I want you to hear this, because I said that I lost everything. Yeah. And that's how I felt for a moment, but it wasn't everything. When I look back, I lost some money. I lost some buildings and some property that I never went to, homes that I didn't live in. And that process of realizing, like, I was so identified with this idea of success that no one except me cared about. My friends didn't care that I had property or had money. My parents, who, again, I've been trying to prove myself to my dad for so long, like that was the ultimate, like, I'd love to, I want his approval. When I told him it was the most nervous I've ever been, like, these homes are going away, I'm a failure. Like, and I was waiting for it. I was waiting for him to say, like, I told you so, you should have been doing it differently. And he didn't. And in that moment, like, thankfully, it warms my heart every time. Both he and my mom said, we're here for you. What do you need? We love you. We'll get through this together. Like, and it was just, I was like, what? And I just wept. And from that moment, I started to ask a better question. Is like, before that, I was like, how do I not lose what I have?
Yes.
Now I had lost things. And I was like, well, what would I do if I had nothing left to lose? And I took stand-up comedy classes. I traveled to Southeast Asia because that's what I had always wanted to do. And things started to open up again in like magical ways. And that put me on a path where, when I started coaching from there, when I started Enjoy with my partner, it started to feel like, again, okay, I'm doing things from, is this feel right for me? Not, is this going to, again, look good to someone else? And that changed everything. So that's a little bit of a shortened and condensed version of about 20 or 25 years, but some very serious ups. And one of the biggest lessons was, again, if I had nothing left to lose and I chose from there, my life immediately got more fulfilling. I chose into what was moving for me, what I wanted to do. I'm not going to be a stand-up comedian. It was the hardest thing I ever did. I like stand up there and be funny. Like, ugh, like I was terrified, but doing that. And I did it for a year with a great coach and classes, and did a few live performances. And I still refer back to that as one of the greatest like triumphs in my life.
I'll bet.
Because I stood into something that I'm like, if I can face this, like that, I feel alive. I feel really alive. So yeah.
Dude, I love how you broke things down, and even the little moments that you're able to really see clearly where and how they shaped you, the reflection and your ability to understand what you were chasing, what you were serving, and really what you were doing in that prior period, and the massive perspective that really pointed you at what was actually important, right? This massive shift that it caused with the compound effect of all the information you've been gathering, consuming, learning, growing, and doing all these things for all these prior years. I feel like you were integrating throughout your life, but that shift in 2008, 2009, that moment when your parents were there, my guess would be the compound effect of everything you'd consumed in those prior 20 years all of a sudden started to get integrated in a different way. And so you talk about like where that's led you, but you talked about the lack of fulfillment, the lack of joy, the lack of happiness. Let's talk about what it looks like on the other side for you.
Yeah, thank you. So for the last decade, we've been now committed to supporting people create change, to grow, and to become a better version of themselves, the version that they know is there, in a fun and gamified way. So we have this challenge platform that turns learning, it turns creating change and positive habits into a game. And we at first kind of kept it to ourselves. We were working with organizations and stuff, but when the pandemic hit, we had some coaches in our community say, hey, our business is kind of changing. Can we use your platform to turn some of our stuff into a gamified challenge? We want to reach more people. And we said, yes, of course. And that put us on this path where all of a sudden, like, we've got hundreds of coaches who are using challenges, which is just a little bit of their content, but then using the platform to support making it fun, having a little bit of community in there, having some, again, no matter how spiritual we are, we like getting points, we like getting rewarded, we like having some prizes attached to things, and going through journeys together. Because I always feel that today, we don't want a guru on a stage anymore. Like, we've passed that. We want to be a part of the journey. We want a guide who's a little bit further along than us, but to run alongside us, run alongside coaching. And it has been one of the fastest growing industries for the last 10 years. And it's because people are saying, like, I have something. I might not be the very best in the world, but I've spent time doing this and I can help other people and I really want to. And that's why coaching is such a beautiful industry, because we don't have to be at the end. We just have to be a little bit further along and have a desire to help people. And when we have the right tools, that can be an audience that reaches around the globe. And it can be an amazing business that, provides the lifestyle that we want as well.
Yeah, what I also think you're doing is you're really empowering some of these coaches to actually recognize that, you use the words, they may not be the best in the world, but they can be the best version of who they are, which is going to be the best that's possible for whatever they're capable of and their unique skill sets, abilities, and ways they deliver those messages. So coming full circle, even back to the way that we communicate, right? The way that we absorb information, the way that we consume, maybe from multiple different teachers, and you're giving people a platform and a way to engage where they can be authentic in the way they are operating with who they are, as well as who they're trying to impact. I know that we're going through, you've given me a little bit of a demo of it, and I know our team wants to dig deeper. And so we've been coordinating with you guys to get that set up, because it's an area that I really want to pursue. Honestly, we just went live this morning. We 2.5 months ago started a Facebook group, and I resisted it for years, right? And the reason I resisted it for years is because I don't participate in other people's Facebook groups. So if I'm going to be leading a Facebook group and I don't engage in other people's, like, where does that exist? And that's not because I don't see value in other people's. It's just that I don't engage in that way. Yeah. Right. And for me, connection is so focused through presence. Yeah. And to your point, like a guru from a stage, for the last 2.5 months, what we've been doing is we've got weekly lives where we're going in and creating unique content in there. We're doing, some gift type posts and things to get some engagement. But essentially, I told the entire community today, when we're shifting it into a really positive place, and it may be something we end up doing on your app, it may be something we do in a different direction. But at the time being, what I said to everybody is I said, I don't see the point in creating a community that's focused around connection when we're communicating primarily through an empty screen. If we're not in a way that we're interacting, right, through either a Zoom platform or an ability that we have more engagement beyond just that empty screen, because I can go live every week and create unique content, but somebody's ability to absorb it, deliver it, anything, they might as well just be consuming it on social media from anything else that we release unless we do it. And so we just shut it down because of all the reasons that you just said, right, that lack in the space. What I'd be really curious about, because you've really come up with this beautiful cocktail of gamification and positive psychology. You talked a little bit about what you're doing and how you're facilitating that, but can you talk about the difference that you've seen in engagement, connection, and community development for the coaches that have been using this beautiful cocktail you've created?
Thank you. This is one of my favorite points. Like, most of us realize, like, if we're going to share what we know, we write a book, we create a course. Great. They're great for transferring information. It's an important part of the process. But if we're being honest, at least if I've got a bookshelf filled with the wisdom of the ages right there. But if you ask me to grab any one of those books and say, what are you applying from this book? I'd be hard pressed to tell you. And the same with courses. The stats are horrible, 4% of people who buy courses online actually complete them. And it's not because the content's not awesome. It's because left to our own devices, without structure, without support, without community, it's hard to finish stuff in our already overwhelmed days. So what challenges are designed to do is get us into action in a simple way that we can actually do in our daily busy lives. So if you think about just taking 5 or 10 minutes a day where you're checking in, you're getting some of the social media like cues of people high-fiving your comments, you're getting the interaction from the coach who's seeing what you're doing, you're sharing wins. And this is the one thing, there's a handful of things that we do that are all scientifically proven to put us into a positive state, to deliver that kind of, like, to bring our best self forward. But the one I want to share is small wins. This goes back to a lot of what you talk about on Rapid Fire. Is when we have a big goal, again, New Year's resolutions, that's kind of the problem with this, is like most of us know what we want in the big side. We want to lose a lot of weight. We want a lot of money. We want a big house. We have these ideas that are big, but most of us are horrible at breaking it down and realizing, well, what do I have to do today? What do I have to do tomorrow? And when we, and that is that because of that, most people only hold their New Year's resolutions less than a week. And what we've figured out is, if you can just make it fun and give people bite-size, deliver it to them. Like, hey, today, just have a little bit of inspiration, share one win. And this is the key, is small wins. People, like, when we do this, we have a wall of wins, which is kind of like a Facebook news feed, but everybody's sharing what a win they had today, or a couple wins, and people high five and comment and share just like you would on social media, but it's all positive. And it starts to train the brain to look for smaller and smaller things that we can actually celebrate, that we typically take for granted, or that we don't feel are big enough to appreciate. We're only waiting for those big things to happen before we can celebrate. And those only happen once in a while. And to be honest, most people aren't even that good at celebrating those things. As soon as we get those things, we set the goal further. So when we train ourselves to celebrate the small daily stuff, this is the thing I just hope everybody takes away today. Just give yourself credit for some of the things that you took action on, some small steps, because no matter how small, and the smaller, the better, because if you start to look at the minuscule ways that we're growing, you start to realize, like, whoa, I'm doing a lot in the feeling. The brain doesn't distinguish that much from a big win and a small win. So all of a sudden we get all the same neurological and physiological benefits all the time. And now we're starting to bring our best self forward, and we're going to be reaching the bigger goals that much quicker. So that's a little bit about how we play with the psychology and the gamification. Well,
I love it. And I mean, really what you're doing too is you're really reinforcing with regularity and consistency that positive momentum in the right direction. You know, so many people, you know, I just had 2 coaching clients yesterday that we had this conversation with, where it's like they can't even give themselves grace and credit for the progress that's been made.
Yeah.
Right. Because even as long as a day ago or 2 days ago, so often we don't get the same endorphin hits. We don't have the same ability in how we operate and can celebrate those moments where we know we've moved through something significant. And so what you're doing is you're not only keeping it in front of people consistently, but you're also giving a trail and history of reminder of what's been done. And I think that's significant. You know, yesterday, literally with 2 of my clients, they were like, I'm getting these mixed messages. Well, it's because the historical narratives and messages that were ingrained in them through their triggers and their patterns are creating a false narrative for what's real right in front of them. And so the mixed messages is not necessarily mixed. They're getting conflicting messages based on the historical patterns of the past and their real-time awareness in the moment. And so what you're allowing people to do is to shorten that curve between those 2 places. And I think that's really cool how you guys are doing it in a gamified, fun, positive psychology way. You know, something that I'm going to totally shift gears on us for a second. And I don't know why this came into my mind, but it did with you. My daughter goes to a beautiful school, and they are focused in the social, psycho-emotional type of development. It's literally a K through 12. There's like 178 students total. And part of our concern is that we have to also show our daughter the real world, because it's this little beautiful utopia. But they have this thing that they say, and that it's when there's a common connection, something that's in common with somebody else, they literally do this and they go connection to show where and how we're similar to each other. Because so often, right, we see the things where we're different, but we don't find the ways that we connect. And so I want to give you a little connection moment on a couple of things, because I think it's really awesome. Now, you were the #1 paddle tennis player in the country for 3 days. Now, though I was not in paddle tennis competitively, I was a tennis pro and played competitively and taught. And it's a sport and passion that I love. Anything with a paddle, anything with a racket, I love it. So when you and I meet together in person for the first time, you'll have to school me in table tennis, because I can hold my own with the average, but I know you're going to sink me. But that's a connection, because I love it. It's a great way to play. Awesome. You also have lived or worked in England, France, Spain, or Mexico. Guess what? I have too, in every single one of those countries. as well as Australia, as well as different pieces. And dude, like, you're just an incredible human being.
Thank you.
The time that I've spent with you, again, your heart, your mind, your soul, the way that you connect is just really, really unique. What I'm curious about is those are cool connections that we have, but another cool connection that we have is our focus on family.
Yeah.
Right? Something that really drives both of us. And, you know, you've got a 7-year-old son and a beautiful wife. And so what I'd like to know, because you got started with kids a little later than some, not that you're old, but just it's the truth, right?
Yeah, I just turned 50 a couple weeks ago. Yeah,
right,
no,
exactly.
Yeah.
And so there's no shame around that. But what I'm really, really curious about is where and how did the focus and intent around family develop for you? Not only historically, but now that you have your own.
Yeah.
And so I'd really like to understand what they mean to you and where and how you use this concept of family in everything you build outside of you, because I've witnessed it. And I feel like that's why I connect with you, is because you feel like family.
I love that. And I think, you know, again, in a lot of cultures, they refer to, you know, we introduced all of our friends to my son as aunts and uncles. Like, it's just all extended family. And that's just because of that. Like, it's just nicer to know that our family is kind of, oh, you're going over to Aunt, you know, to Aunt Sarah's, to Uncle Sean's, you know, wherever that is. And it's just, that's cool. Like, they're part of our family. For me, I'm fortunate. I have great parents, again, small town, good value, you know, good values. They were there. My dad coached every athletic thing I was ever in. They were there. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. So I got a lot of attention, a lot of love. And she's a special mom. So she's great with, I mean, just kind of objectively really good with kids. For me, though, then growing, I think I always had that, like, I'd love to be a dad sometime. I'd love to have a family, but then it wasn't happening for me. Like, again, this was a big learning, but basically I was in Southern California and I was repeating, like, I kept thinking, I'm like, oh, I'm still only like 28, but I wasn't. I was 35. I was 39. Like, I was getting older, but in Southern California, you can live that life until you're 80. Yeah. So I realized, like, if I want different, I'm really going to have to consciously choose it. And that's when I started to, you know, I was looking, like, I'm presenting myself and I'm trying to be someone who's fun to date, not someone who's a great partner, not someone who wants to build a life with someone. So I shifted that, and it wasn't long after that I met my now wife, and when we had Bodhi. So Bodhi's our son. You know, a lot of people have this, like, reference points from earlier in their lives where they felt with a dog, you know, like a dog, a pet, a grandma, where they felt unconditional love. For me, that was a hard place to get to. I had a lot of judgment on myself. I had a lot of judgment I was working through all the time. But when Bodhi entered my life, I knew what unconditional love was, and it changed me. Like, I mean, I think all parents can kind of relate to this. Like, my heart was big. Like, he could do anything.
Words can't describe it. Yeah.
Yeah, he could do anything. And especially, like, the moments that I would really realize this is when he would, like, when he yells at me, or he's like super he's not in a good way. And then I'm like, for anyone else, that would totally trigger me all day. For him, 2 minutes later, like, I just want to play with him. Like, and it's so great to watch how quickly I could let go of what I would typically hold on to for a very long time. He's been this magical teacher and this magical guide of what's possible in human relaip. Yes, and the joy the joy that comes forward in being with him, and the lessons. Like, I'll tell you, the one quick little lesson is when we would go for a walk all the time, and I had the idea, let's go to the park, right? Well, the park's a couple of blocks away from us. We'd get down the stairs and out the door, and he'd see some ants, and then he'd want to get down, and I'd be like, no. At first, I was like, come on, let's go. We're going to the. And I was taking him out of what was right there, and because I needed to get to the park to do what? To look at ants. Like, we're just going to look at ants over there too. But I had the destination, and I was forgetting. I mean, again, we all know that it's the journey, not the destination. But Bodhi taught me that. I stop now. If he sees something, if he wants to talk about animals or the leaves or trees or something on his mind, we stop, we sit on the sidewalk. I don't care. And he gives me permission to look. Like, in the past, I'd be, well, what do I look like? Do I look weird? I don't care at all. I'm in his world. This is awesome. Yeah. I wish everybody had this kind of connection with their kids. And for me, it's just like, there's just lesson after lesson around the person I want to be and what's possible to experience joy in the world. So it's amazing. I love when dads especially I love when dads especially are super into being a dad. which like you. So I just really appreciate that.
Dude, it's awesome. I know I kept you past the scheduled time. Do you have a few more minutes for a few more questions?
I do. Yeah.
And if you don't, that's okay, brother. We'll have you back again. But there's a couple things I'd love to dig into if you have a few.
Sure.
Okay. I'm going to ask you permission to ask you a more personal, deeper question. And you can say no even after you hear the question. Okay?
Yeah, go for it.
Cool. I think that there's a lot of lessons that can be learned through other people's stories, through their triggers, through their patterns of their past. You talk about where and how you get triggered externally by so many other people to carry the resistance and energy drain, but for your son, that doesn't exist. It's moments, it's minutes. You also talked a lot about where you were retiring at 30, losing everything at 35. But when you talk about your family, what's interesting is in the beginning, you talk about your dad and the pressure and the need to impress. But when we talk about family, you're like, I had the greatest parents ever. They were at everything. My mom had this special connection, this depth. And so what I'd be curious about, because there's a lot of people that we work with that identify just like you. I had a great childhood. I had a great upbringing. I had all these things. Yet emotional triggers and behavioral patterns still develop in a way that either shame or worth or connection or relationships are somehow disconnected because of the interference we've allowed to come in. What I'm curious about for you, given the foundation you created, the vision you created for the family that they created for you and around you, where do you believe some of those triggers came in your need to impress externally, your need to impress your father? And given that they were at everything, what made you believe that they might not be there for you when you told them that you lost everything?
Well, that's also great. And with age and with being a parent, you start, you can get a little bit more perspective and move into a perspective of appreciation for what they were dealing with. My parents had no money when they were starting, they had 3 kids, a single income, all of those things that I didn't take into consideration when I was going through it as a child, that I can now appreciate. Wow, they really did show up and did the very best they could with a tougher situation. I mean, we have one child, we've got a nanny at times, we've got my in-laws here, and we're still tired. And so it's just really easy to get into their world more now. But a couple of those things, my dad grew up in an age where working hard work, that was that's the badge of honor. I didn't like growing up, especially his kind of work, like chores and just to do work. It was all, I wanted to play, I wanted to experience things that had no necessary outcome. I just wanted to be experiencing things. And that was not why do you want to travel to Spain? Why don't you get, there was just always this, you should just be working. That's what creates. And so as long as my life worked, it was fine that I was doing it differently. But when it didn't work, when the money didn't work, what I felt is he was going to be able to say, I told you so. And I was going to be wrong. And my entire worldview of hoping that I could live a life according to how I wanted to live was going to collapse. And I was going to have to move into this way of being that I didn't want, which was, it's only about work. It's only about work. And as he's retired now, I still watch, he can't let go of it. He just can't let go of working. And
my dad's no different.
Yeah. So that's one place. But again, that gets instilled and I'm fighting against it. But at the same point, I admire him. He was my hero. There's all those things that went in early as well. So as long as it's also working for me, then we can be, now we can be peers. But if it doesn't work, did I throw away my life? Did I lose those things? And on my mom's side, the triggers for me, I was just talking with my wife last night. I'm a short fuse. I'm Italian. I have a short fuse, and I get over it quickly. But I can feel it coming. It's like, don't say that. Don't say that. And then I say it. And my mom was the same way. Her mom was the same way. And my wife is like, if you just wouldn't say it like that. And I know it. And I said, I get it. And I hear you. And this is what happened. I was, yelled at a lot. And my mom was, she was quick and emotional, and then she'd be over it. But it was like, I was on edge. So when I feel threatened or pushed against or something, my reaction is I had to yell back. That was how but that doesn't work with my wife. That doesn't work with my colleagues. And so to realize okay, there's a better way to communicate. That was in there deep. I love my mom, and that's she did a great job coming from where she was coming from, but I need to take control of being better with my wife, being better with the people in my life. And that's a journey. I'm not that's on the learning curve right now. For
there
me.
is no final destination, brother. It's only constant evolution of self. So you just outlined though, how so many of our triggers and patterns can be either based just on the environments that we're in and have nothing to do with intent. right? I think your parents' intent and heart was always in the place that you connect to, and that's why you always felt that safety. But that's why it's so difficult sometimes for people to get to the roots of those triggers. And I love how beautifully you articulated the difference between both, how you've learned to move through them, and the fact that it's something that we'll always be focusing on because we don't ever escape them. We just have the impact of them become less and less in our lives. Beautifully said, brother. I really appreciate you here. We're going to definitely have to have you back on some of our other shows. I just love being around you. I love what you put into the world. How can people find you? I know we posted a couple quick things, and then we'll let you go with your day, brother.
Yep. So jeff@enjoyglobal.com is my email. That would be a great space if you want to just connect. I'm on LinkedIn. That's where I'm most active. Jeff Baetto. mychallengecreator.com. If you're interested in seeing how you can take some of your amazing wisdom content and turn it into a gamified challenge. But otherwise, I'm around. So on all the social medias. Thanks so much for having me, Brian, man. This is so awesome.
Dude, well, yeah, I really appreciate the energy and everything that you're putting out. And so whenever there's a connection, whenever there's a similar vibration and frequency, we got to figure out how we can amplify together. And so, brother, man, I know this is just the beginning, and I appreciate who you are, all that you deliver, the transparency and the vulnerability with which you show up in the world, because it is our stories that empower others to share theirs and move through theirs. And you do it so beautifully. And your mixture of everything about who you are and your background and your patterns just comes together to create a really beautiful cocktail in general around impact in the world. So thank you, brother.
Thank you. And some wise man said that there's three things. It's showing up, how we show up, and where we show up. I know you say that all the time, and you just do that fantastically in so many different ways with a big mission in front of you. I'm just glad you're in my world, and I'm personally just glad you're in the world. But now I'm fortunate to be able to say you're more specifically in my world. So thank you.
Hey, thank you, friend. We will talk soon. Okay.
All right. Take care, Brian.
Take care, brother. So everybody, today we're going to wrap right after that. We kept him for a few minutes longer because he was a beautiful feature. He also brought some fun. He also brought some coaching, and he brought some fire content. So sometimes we get lucky, and this rapid fire show actually covers all 4 categories in one. That's what we did today. Jeff is an incredible man. They're doing some incredible stuff. I know that there's a lot of coaches out there that we connect with, communicate with, and work with. And by all means, though we are not on the platform yet, we've demoed it, we're impressed, and we're looking further. I would really encourage you to at least connect, kick the tires, and just know that no matter what, you'd be connecting with another solid human being who's creating positive impact in the world. Everybody, thank you for continually tuning in. Thank you for the comments, the engagement, the support, the questions, and the prompts. Until next time, be great.